Shalom. I'm Eddie Chumney of Hebraic Heritage Ministries, and we welcome you to this week's Focus Israel Report. In this week's report, we're going to be sharing with you regarding the current status of the Israeli-Palestinian peace process, and it is as follows. In a Bloomberg article, U.S. journalist Jeffrey Goldberg, who is closely affiliated with the Obama White House, reported that U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry warned Israel Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu of a widespread campaign to delegitimize Israel, in Kerry's words, on steroids if renewed peace negotiations fail. In moving forward with the peace process, Netanyahu has made some of those who make up the base of his own political party, that is Likud, to be quite nervous. According to Goldberg, Kerry believes that the only thing that Netanyahu fears more than the Iranian nuclear program is international isolation of Israel. Meanwhile, Debka, an Israel intelligence and news gathering service, reports that the formal Israel-Palestinian peace negotiations are only an outer shell of the secret hardcore negotiations that have been taking place for weeks between U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry, Israel Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, and Palestinian Authority Chairman Mahmoud Abbas. The real private talks between Kerry, Netanyahu, and Abbas are approaching a climax on the fundamental issues of borders, Jerusalem, refugees, and settlements. Every afternoon in the past few weeks, Kerry has called the Israeli Prime Minister and Palestinian leader on secure phone lines. Any incoming calls from the two leaders are switched directly through to the Secretary of State. This procedure is unheard of within the U.S. State Department. Debka sources report that there has been dramatic progress made in the private talks between Kerry, Netanyahu, and Abbas, such that Kerry was asking Netanyahu for specific information on the Jewish settlements he was willing to remove in the West Bank, and Abbas was giving his own list. Although Secretary Kerry has stated publicly that his objective is a final resolution of the Israeli-Palestinian dispute, his expectations are more realistic in his behind-the-scenes negotiations. All three parties believe that the most that they can achieve right now is an interim agreement. Outstanding issues will have to be set aside for an unknown future round of talks. For now, the officials assigned with conducting the formal negotiations are not privy to the progress made secretly by their principals. U.S. Special Envoy Ambassador Martin Indyk, Justice Minister and Senior Israel Negotiator Tzipi Livni, and Palestinian Chief Negotiator Saeb Erekat are therefore still in the dark. However, progress is substantial enough by now to have prompted Kerry to convene a meeting of Jewish American leaders for a briefing that was held on August the 8th at the White House. He told them that there was a strategic imperative to arrive at a peace agreement soon, and he said he understood the difficulties that Netanyahu faced in dealing with a government coalition that included right-wing parties and figures. He was described as appearing bullish about the talks, but also nervous about the Israeli Prime Minister's ability to overcome the resistance in his own Likud party and government coalition to sweeping concessions on settlements. In addition to U.S. Special Envoy Ambassador Martin Indyk, Kerry invited National Security Advisor Susan Rice to join him at the meeting of American Jewish leaders to signal President Barack Obama's approval. The meeting lasted for 90 minutes. Kerry's motive in summoning American Jewish leaders to the White House was his belief that progress in the negotiations has brought the Israeli Prime Minister close to a crossroads. He will soon have to face the decision to whether he wants to reshuffle his cabinet and replace ministers who would oppose an interim agreement between Israel and the Palestinians. For this step, he would have to find the support of American Jewry helpful. Netanyahu will soon need to present the leaders of the pro-settlement parties Israel Beiteinu and Jewish Home with a choice of backing him up all the way with an accord with the Palestinians or quit the government coalition. The same question will need to be put to Netanyahu's own Likud party members who oppose a Palestinian state. Meanwhile, the first round of Israel-PLO peace negotiations were held in Jerusalem on August the 14th. They lasted for 5 hours. The meeting was secret in an attempt by both sides to prevent leaks to the media and to maintain trust in the negotiations. Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas said that the first session of talks with Israel dealt with all final status issues, including borders, Jerusalem, settlements, refugees, security, and prisoners. Speaking at a press conference in Ramallah after meeting with UN Secretary Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, Abbas said, "Palestine, according to international law, has become a state under occupation. This occupation must end on the basis of a two-state solution on the 67 borders with a slight swap of land, UN resolutions, and the Arab Peace Initiative." As talks began, there is anger in Israel over the leak from U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry's circles of his threats that Israel would face a campaign against its legitimacy unless it gives way to pressures on the West Bank settlements. The Secretary would be better advised to focus on the hardening of the Palestinian position, said Israeli sources. They also pointed out that although Kerry has insisted that the talks be kept secret, his own people were pouring out confidential data to the media. This can only be explained, says the Israeli sources, by the talks having run into a crisis before they began. Recently, Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas made a statement that in any future Palestinian state that it must be free of every last Jew, whether it be civilian or military. In doing so, Abbas took an even more extreme line than his predecessor Yasser Arafat did in 2000. In the trilateral talks that he held with then Israel Prime Minister Ehud Barak under the auspices of U.S. President Bill Clinton in the summer of 2000, the Palestinian leader accepted the right of the Israeli Defense Forces to rapidly redeploy on the West Bank and the Jordan Rift Valley in the event of an Israeli security crisis threatening it from the east. Furthermore, Abbas also backed away from the Palestinians' original consent for Israel's security forces to be posted at the border crossings of a future Palestinian state. As talks were beginning, Israel authorized construction of around 800 new housing units in East Jerusalem and around 400 in the West Bank. The Israel Housing Ministry said, "We will continue issuing housing tenders for construction in Jerusalem and the settlement blocks. However, the plans are in their early stages and the construction could take as long as 2 years to begin." Palestinian negotiator Mohammed Shataya said that these announcements prove that Israel wasn't serious about negotiations and was trying to topple the foundations of a peace agreement solution, which should be based on a Palestinian state on 67 borders. Furthermore, it is a slap in the face of the United States, who is trying to restart direct peace talks, he said. Palestinian chief negotiator Saeb Erekat sent a letter to Secretary of State John Kerry charging that Israel's latest settlement plans were an indication of Israel's bad faith and lack of seriousness in the talks. Erekat urged Kerry to take the necessary action to ensure that Israel does not advance any of its settlement plans and abides by its legal obligations and commitments. He said that the Palestinians see the move as a direct defiance of the U.S. role in facilitating negotiations, adding that it was difficult to see how peace talks could move forward while settlements expand. In a meeting with UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, Israel Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu told him that the root of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is the refusal by the Palestinians to recognize the Jewish state on any border, and it has nothing to do with Israel's settlements. He remarked that until recently, the Israel-Palestinian conflict was commonly cited as the root of instability in the Middle East, but that this is no longer the case in the wake of the unrest in the Arab and Muslim world. Addressing the Palestinian issue, the Prime Minister said that the conflict began even before one settlement was established. He noted that attacks against Israel continued despite the Gaza pullout, and that this was because of a fundamental rejection of the Jewish state. He stressed that construction in areas such as Gilo or in the settlement blocks, which he said everyone, including the Palestinians, knows will stay under Israeli sovereignty in a future agreement, should not be the main issue of debate and discussion. The main issue should be how to achieve a demilitarized Palestinian state that will recognize the one and only Jewish state, Netanyahu said. In the wake of Chief Palestinian negotiator Saeb Erekat's angry letter to U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry about Israel's new settlement building amid the resumption of peace talks, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu sent his own letter to Kerry over the weekend, lambasting the Palestinians for failing to curb incitement against Israel. Netanyahu wrote to Kerry that leading Palestinian Authority officials were calling for Israel's destruction even after peace talks resumed on July the 31st. Incitement and peace don't go together, Netanyahu wrote, explaining that new generations of Palestinians were being taught to hate Israel. further fueling the cycle of violence. Netanyahu asserted, for example, that Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas's comment that a future Palestinian state wouldn't have a single Jew in it, which Abbas made as peace talks kicked off in the United States 2 weeks ago, was a form of incitement. He also pointed out that an anchor of the Palestinian official news channel stated recently that the state of Palestine would extend from Rosh Hanikra to Eilat, meaning the entire length of Israel, constituting yet another statement of incitement. Finally, in another example of Palestinian Authority denial of Jewish connection to Jerusalem and the very legitimacy of the State of Israel, the Presidential Guard of Palestinian Authority Chairman Mahmoud Abbas claims that the Western Wall in Jerusalem is an Arab and Islamic site. Last week, a picture of the Western Wall was posted onto the Palestinian Authority Presidential Guard's official Facebook page with a Palestinian flag superimposed over the Western Wall. Israel and Palestinian negotiators met on August the 20th, completely out of the media spotlight, as one meeting was held in Jerusalem during the day, with the second meeting held in the evening. It was attended by PLO chief negotiator Saeb Erekat and Mohammed Shataya, and the Israeli representatives consisted of Israel chief negotiator Tzipi Livni and Benjamin Netanyahu's lawyer Yitzhak Molko. Given the agreement that Israel and the Palestinians made with U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry to keep the content of the discussion secret from the public, there was no pre-announcement of these meetings in Jerusalem or any statement following them. Israel chief negotiator Tzipi Livni said that there will be dramatic decisions that will need to be made by Israel at the end of the current talks, but that both sides agreed not to discuss the details in the negotiating process in order to be able to build trust between both sides. We are arguing, but we are arguing inside the discussion room, Tzipi Livni said. According to a senior Palestinian spokesperson, there has been no breakthrough and no agreement in the talks so far. Discussions have not been on specific details. Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas reiterated his commitment to a two-state solution that would see the establishment of an independent Palestinian state based on the 1967 borders with East Jerusalem as its capital. In an interview with an Arab radio station, PLO chief negotiator Saeb Erekat revealed that the Palestinians would not have returned to the negotiating table with Israel had it not received a letter of assurance from the United States guaranteeing the PLO's main negotiating preconditions. Erekat said in the interview that the United States had assured the Palestinians in writing that talks would recognize the 1967 borders as the basis of a Palestinian state, and the talks would deal with all core issues, namely Jerusalem, refugees, borders, security, and water, and that they would be completed within 6 to 9 months, and that there would be no interim solutions, but that only a final status agreement would be signed. Erekat also said that the European Union's new guidelines, which boycott Israeli organizations in the West Bank and East Jerusalem, was done by the European Union as part of a deal reached with the Palestinians in order for them to resume negotiations with Israel. He said that the Palestinians were currently talking with Latin American countries, China, Russia, Japan, and the African Union to adopt similar sanctions toward building Jewish homes in the West Bank and East Jerusalem. What the European Union agreed to do was a major accomplishment, Erekat said. The Palestinians would not have returned to the negotiating table with Israel without a written document that came from the European Union that confirmed the main points in the negotiating process. Meanwhile, the Palestinians continue to say that they are willing to sue Israel through international bodies if Israel continues to build Jewish homes in the West Bank and East Jerusalem, warning that continuing to do so would put an end to the current round of talks. That is the current status of the Israeli-Palestinian peace process. Until we do it again, Shalom. In Yeshua the Messiah, Amen.